This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We're focusing on Connecticut's 5th Congressional District, where there are 5 candidates vying for the seat. A few weeks ago, we spoke to the Democratic candidates, and today, Where We Live, we check in with 3 Republicans who will be on that primary ballot August 14th. Now, do you live in the 5th Congressional District? What kind of candidate are you looking for to replace incumbent Elizabeth Esty, who's not seeking re-election? We want to hear from you, 860-275-7266. You can email us, where we live, at WNPR.org. And today we're on Facebook Live, so if you are watching the live video stream, please add your question or comment in the comments field below that video stream. And as always, we're on Twitter, at Where We Live. So to welcome into the studio now is Rich DuPont, who lives in Watertown, former director of the Advanced Manufacturing Technology Center at Housatonic Community College. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Pleased to be here.
Also here is Manny Santos. He's a Meriden resident. He's the Republican-endorsed candidate, former mayor to the city of Meriden back in 2013. Manny, welcome to the show.
Awesome being here.
And Ruby Corby O'Neill lives in Southbury. She's a retired psychology professor. Ruby, welcome to Where We Live.
Thank you very much for having me.
I think often the challenge when you have not held elected office, I know a couple of the candidates here have not, the challenge is getting people to know who you are, and that's why you're on the campaign trail. But since you're on our show, I want to spend a little time so our listeners know your background. So, Rich, go ahead and tell us about yourself, where you were born and raised, and what you bring to the congressional seat of the 5th District.
Born and raised in Waterbury. Lived in the 5th District my entire life. Been in Watertown for the last 39 years. I built a career around manufacturing, where I spent about 25, 26 years as a manufacturer. During that period, got very, very involved in advocating for programs to support manufacturing. It's been the core of what I do. That has led me to many, many other things that I do in the community and statewide, having to do with education, around manufacturing, around employment, and economic development. So I do believe in people helping people, and I see plenty of opportunity for Connecticut, and is why I've decided to come into this 5th District race.
Manny, I mentioned you're the former mayor of Meriden, but why try for Congress?
Well, for pretty much the same reason that I decided to run for mayor. Standing on the sidelines is not an option for me when there's so much potential in our state and indeed our country. And so I felt it very important that someone jump in well before Elizabeth Esty decided not to run for re-election. And I felt it important enough to send someone to Washington, D.C., who's reflects the values of a great America that most of us truly understand and appreciate what America was a number of years ago. And
tell us your story. What led you to Connecticut?
Well, I was born in Portugal, and we immigrated here in 1974. From Portugal, which is at that time was a authoritarian regime, and my parents got just mediocre jobs. Really, I mean they supported us really as best as they could. I grew up in Hartford, went to all the public schools there, and eventually decided to go into the military after high school. So I joined the Marine Corps, and eventually decided to go to college, and I obtained a mechanical engineering degree from UConn. Worked in manufacturing for over 15 years, developing products in various industries right here in Connecticut. But I saw the challenges of manufacturing that Connecticut faced. I actually lost my job to NAFTA, believe it or not, when I was working in Cheshire. And then when the opportunity came to run for mayor in Meriden, I decided to step up. It was my first run for elected office, and I won pretty decisively too. And I want to do the same thing for the 5th Congressional District in representing them in Congress.
And to your left is Ruby Corby O'Neill, a Southbury resident. I mentioned at the beginning of the show you're a retired educator. Tell us about yourself.
I was born in Honduras in Central America, and as you know, Honduras is at the center of this immigration crisis, along with other Central American countries. We sailed into the port of Baltimore when I was almost 2 years old, where Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. And then we traveled to the Bronx, where my family lived with my grandparents, and I grew up there and in Queens. I went to New York City public schools. I remember in high school, I worked at a factory to help my family out. And then when I got older, I first went away to college and then came back after a year. I was through a program in New York called the SPs, where you went from 7th grade to 9th grade. You skipped the 8th grade. So I got to college a year early. And then I came back and I worked, and eventually I earned my undergraduate degree and 2 master's degrees and a PhD in psychology with a specialty in developmental psychology. And then I became a tenured professor for many years. And I retired in 2013. And, every semester, every September, you get a new group of students, and you're staying with them for 4 years. And you get to know them and their struggles. You meet their parents. You meet their siblings. And I saw students struggling 2 to 3 jobs, part-time jobs, just to try to make ends meet. And I heard stories of how their parents were struggling. It reminded me very much of the struggles that my family experienced. I came from very little. I grew up as an immigrant in the Bronx, and we had to work very hard. And I'm an immigration success story. We came here legally. We went through the process. I know what it's like to struggle financially. I lost my previous marriage, my previous family. My ex-husband had a substance abuse disorder. He was a medical doctor, and he lost his medical license in the states of New York and Connecticut. I know what it's like not to rub 2 nickels together, and my house went in foreclosure. I know what it's like to struggle and to have to start all over again and, worry about how you're going to feed your children. And when I travel across this district and I meet people, I see how they're struggling. I've met people who've lost their homes in foreclosure or who've lost their jobs.
So that's one of the reasons that
Oh,
you
absolutely.
want to run for the 5th
Yeah.
district. I want to turn back to the other candidates in the room. We want to make sure everyone has enough time to talk about so many issues before the 5th district, the economy, immigration. But I am curious, as you go around the campaign trail, Rich, what are you hearing from residents in the 5th district? What are the issues that matter to them? We heard a little bit from Ruby in terms of the economy.
Well, I think that does dovetail into what I hear most frequently, and my feet around the street in the 5th District every day, as they've been for the last 30 years. Quality of life. Why can't we move forward? And that is what we spend our time doing. And again, it begins with education. And I think in Connecticut right now, and in particular our 5th District, when we look at our inner cities, it's very, very important to focus on people understanding the opportunities they have to lift themselves and break the cycles of poverty that they've lived in year after year after year, sometimes generation after generation. And employment's the key to doing that. And when you put people to work, they feel good about themselves. They tend to stay away from things that compromise where they go in life, perhaps crime, perhaps drugs, perhaps other things that take them down. And so we're spending an awful lot of time in the work that we do now and the work that I want to take the experience I've built on to Washington and getting the message out that you don't have to accept what you think you do. There are plenty of opportunities on there to change your lives, and we see that happening every day. So
you'll work towards more economic development and educational opportunities.
Community development first. Economic development follows community development. Community has to be a big part of economic development.
That's Rich
Starts
DuPont.
with education.
That's Rich DuPont, one of the Republican candidates in the 5th District running in the August 14th primary. This is where we live. You can join our conversation, 860-275-7266. With us today also another candidate, Republican-endorsed candidate, Manny Santos. What do you bring to the 5th District? What are you hearing from them about why they should vote for you, Manny?
One of the biggest issues that I hear when I crisscross the district is the divisive issue of illegal immigration, and the American people just want that resolved. They believe that our federal government has been too lenient on individuals coming through our border illegally, and they just the government hasn't done anything for the last couple of administrations actually. And so they want that resolved. One of the ways to resolve that is, frankly, the current administration is trying to do that. And they're getting a lot of flack, of course, on it because...
Do you support the zero tolerance at the border, separating children from their parents?
Well, at the time, that was the common practice, and there was some agreement. I forget the name of that particular protocol, but the legislation that just recently passed by Congress does allow the children to remain with the parents while they're being processed. So that issue has already been resolved. We got to this point because it's been ignored. We were in the similar situation about 30 years ago in the 80s when President Reagan granted amnesty to several million people back then. And the border wasn't secured then, and it still isn't secured, and that's the main problem. We don't have a secured border. We don't have the rigorous enforcement of our immigration laws. And so we are finally enforcing our laws. And so you're going to have some issues, but I believe in the long run, this is going to work out really well for our country and for Americans.
Ruby, what are solutions when we talk about immigration reform? Again, as Manny referenced, this has been something that's been talked about for decades. The country has really failed to come up with comprehensive immigration reform. It has become divisive. So much attention on people coming in from the southern border, but there's lots of issues that need to be reformed, including people who overstay their visa. What are your ideas to reform our immigration system?
Well, I just wanted to make the listeners aware that the agreement to which he was referring is the Flores consent decree. And there wasn't legislation passed last week. It was an executive order. Speaker Ryan tried to introduce legislation to keep the children together, but in a stark and egregious example of outcome determination bias, Congressman Jim Himes of the Connecticut Democrat delegation, the day before Speaker Ryan even introduced this bill on the floor of the House, before debates or arguments were heard, before there was an opportunity for any amendments to be presented, Congressman Himes said, "I'm not going to sign that bill," and neither are other Democrats.
You're talking often about the gridlock that Americans see in Congress. So
right,
if you're
elected,
if you're elected, how do you get past that partisanship?
Yeah,
and what are some of your ideas to reform the immigration system?
Right, the Do Nothing Congress. You had asked earlier about the children at the border and separation. So now we're hearing a lot of grinding and gnashing of teeth, even though under the previous administration, the Democrats had control of the House and the Senate, and they didn't do anything about this Flores consent decree. What I would introduce, fortunately, we have an executive order, but we need to change the laws. You see, we can't. I understand that there are benefits.
Are the laws being enforced to begin with, to change the laws? I'm just curious, like when you say to change the laws.
Well, the Flores consent decree is a law. And the executive order, it's nice that the president did that, but we have a separation of powers for a reason. And we can't go around, do an end run around the authority and the power that the Constitution has delegated to the Congress. And a president with the stroke of a pen shouldn't be able to pick and cherry pick and choose which laws they want to enforce and which laws they don't. Now, I understand that his hand was forced because Congress couldn't make it happen. I would introduce bills. I would introduce a bill to change the Flores consent decree, and I will work with anybody who will work with me on securing the border, ending catch and release. I think that's cruel.
Can I ask what you think should happen to the many migrants who come up from countries such as Honduras that are looking for safety and a better life? What should we happen to them?
Well, I think they should go through the process, through the asylum process. And we have to be able to determine if the adults who are accompanying those children are legitimate adults. Because I have a cousin who still goes back and forth to Honduras that's telling me what's happening with the young children. He is sponsoring a young child who at 6 years old, the gangs were harassing him and terrorizing this little boy to be a mule, a drug mule. So my cousin is sponsoring him so that he can go to a private school, a Catholic school. So what's happening in these poor villages in the northern triangle of Central America, of Honduras, El Salvador, in Guatemala, is that the MS-13 and the drug cartels are raiding those villages, kidnapping those children, and using them as human shields to crash the border. And another problem that we have, so we need to determine if those adults are legitimate. But one of the big problems we have is that there's a highway system, Interstate 44 and Interstate 70, that goes from the southern border up through the northern border and intersects St. Louis, Missouri, and intersects a very widespread interstate system in our country, and that's why St. Louis, Missouri has such a high incidence rate of human trafficking and sex trafficking. So we have to, I agree with you, so these conditions are horrible in Honduras. It's the murder capital of the world. But we send foreign aid dollars there, and we have to be willing to hold these countries accountable for what is going on in their countries. They are losing their future and they are losing their youth.
I want to let Rich DuPont chime in on immigration reform since the other two candidates were able to talk about that. What are solutions, again, to reform the system? And do you support President Trump's actions just a few weeks ago where the Attorney General as well were separating children from their parents?
Yeah, I think we need to look at a few things there. And I think, first of all, I do support immigration reform because our system is broken. And we know that when we have a system that works legally, then we have success. And I mean, you have examples of two people in the studio here who immigrated to this country legally, without problem, illegally. Now, why are people doing that is another question, okay? I like to keep this a little bit to the 5th District as well, knowing that we have a national problem. How does it affect our 5th District, and what do the people in this district expect out of that, and where do they want us to stand? I don't think anybody in their right mind wants to see families separated from children. But I think when we talk about that issue, we need to take a look at what's happening. How many of those children are being sent here without families, first of all? How many of those children are detained, sent here with no guardian or anybody else? And we can't get wrapped up in the media about all this. We need to understand the statistics. And in fact, statistics will show you that if you look at that, the majority of those children that we're talking about that were detained were not here with families. They were sent here by desperate families alone to get them out of the countries. That's a whole different problem than we're led to believe it is. So I do believe that we need to focus on reform. And I believe,
what does reform look like, though, when we talk about the immigration system?
I think it starts with securing our borders. I really do.
Do you support President Trump's idea to build a wall?
Absolutely.
Billions of dollars of taxpayers?
Absolutely.
Dollars.
I do, because I think that funnels into other things that create a vibrant economy for the United States, and I think we need to take it back. I think at the same time we need to secure our northern border, and I'm not suggesting we build a wall there, but I think we're talking about national security, and we have to start there. We have to bring the things back to America that establish us as leaders and allow us to be leaders in this world. So by building a wall, by beefing up our borders, by beefing up our military, by reshoring manufacturing, to bring the components that allow us to have a strong military base back here in the United States so that we're not dependent on people, allow us to become the strength that we were once before.
I asked Ruby about the problem where people overstay their visas. How should that be fixed?
Yeah, I think, again, that's regulation. That's a system that's broke. I mean, people here come here on visas for a term, and the term has to be honored. And those that are not honoring that term have to follow the process, and we have to enforce the process. If we don't enforce rules, there is no purpose of having rules. When we don't have rules, we have no law. When we don't have law, we have disorder. That's exactly where we are right now.
Manny, before we head to break, I just wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about immigration reform more in depth, since our other candidates had more time as well. And that is, you have, when we talk about the people that are living here illegally, what should they have a pathway to citizenship? What is your ideas for dealing with people who are already here?
We have there's estimates of 14 to as high as 30 million people here illegally. There's no way that we should grant citizenship to illegals. I am in favor of a path to legalization for those individuals who qualify under the DACA program. These are young children that were brought here as young children, with no choice of their own. They went to our public schools. This is probably the only culture, the only nation that they know of. And so in order to, and we're not going to separate those families. And many of them, the far majority of them are here with their parents. We're not going to separate those parents. The parents, for the most part, are hardworking, productive individuals. So the people that qualify under the DACA should have a clear but rigorous path to legalization, which is essentially a green card, and that every few years gets reviewed. I still have family members with green cards. There's nothing wrong with it, absolutely nothing wrong with it. The only thing that you cannot do is vote. But you can work, you can own property, and so on. But our legal immigration, our immigration is not so much broken. It's been neglected and not properly enforced for so many decades that it is overwhelming the system now. Now that we're trying to enforce the laws, now that we're trying to resolve the problem, we see deficiencies in our system. But this goes back to several administrations and several Congresses that did nothing and just kicked the can down the road just so that they could get reelected.
This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Today we're talking to 3 Republican candidates running for the 5th Congressional District. There are more topics to talk about besides immigration. After the break, we're going to continue that discussion. We want to take your calls, too. Join us, 860-275-7266. You can also find us on Facebook Live today. Just add your comment or question below the video stream, and we'll be back right after a break. This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. The Connecticut governor's race is not the only one that has attracted a lot of interest. The 5th Congressional District has 5 candidates running for Elizabeth Estes' seat, including 3 Republicans. They're in studio with me today. Ruby Corby O'Neill, who lives in Southbury, Manny Santos from Meriden, also the Republican endorsed candidate, and Rich DuPont, who lives in Watertown. You can join our conversation, too. The number 860-275-7266. Find us on Facebook and Twitter to search for @WhereWeLive. I wanted to talk a little bit more about President Trump's policies. Again, your Republican candidates who are hoping to have a seat in Congress. And Ruby, I'll go to you. How would you rate the job that President Trump has been doing for Americans, and specifically how it impacts us here in Connecticut?
Well, he's trying to secure the border, and he is becoming a champion for free trade, and his tax Cut and Jobs Act has benefited Connecticut. We have in the country over 6 million workers who have seen pay increases or benefits increases. We have a lower unemployment rate with minorities, with Latinos, and African Americans and women. We have over 3 million new jobs since this administration has taken over. We have 75 utility companies have announced that they're going to lower their rates. And if you've spoken to any senior citizens lately, they are suffering with prescription prices and also their electric rates and their utility rates. They're having a hard time making ends meet. So it's great news to hear that. I like the fact that he appointed a female head of the CIA for the first time in the history of the CIA. I love the fact that he negotiated the release of those American prisoners in North Korea. I like the fact that he got North and South Korea talking to each other. So he's doing some positive things. And as I said, he's trying to secure the border, and he's trying to make America competitive again. And it's nice to see a president finally fighting for the American worker and standing up for the American worker, because I think your question touches upon the tariffs issue. And honestly, I believe these tariffs, these are not Trump tariffs. These are reciprocal tariffs because those countries had initially levied tariffs against us. So these are reciprocal, and he's just trying to protect the American worker. Those tariffs came over to us first, and he's like, right back at you.
So Ruby would give President Trump a grade A for what he's done in 18 months.
Well, above average for sure. Yeah.
So we'll get to maybe some policy differences that you would have with the president coming up, but I want to get the other candidates' take on the job that President Trump is doing, how it impacts us here in Connecticut. Manny.
Well, I think the president is doing a good job. There's no doubt that when someone new to the position in politics, he wasn't a politician before. He's used to doing things his own way. And so he's had a learning curve. But overall, I believe he's doing the right thing. His policies are right for America, and I'll support those policies. When you look at the economy, how it's turning around, you got all these cash that's coming back from overseas. These American companies had a lot of cash, billions of dollars overseas. And in order for them to bring it back into the United States, they would see heavy taxes imposed on it. So those thresholds, those taxes are now reduced, and that money is able to come back into the United States, into our economy, and we see a result. We see job creation. We see the American spirit finally having some confidence that their children are going to be better off than they are. So there's no doubt that the president is doing a good job. The economy is roaring. The military is being rebuilt. ISIS is almost removed from the Middle East. So and that, by the way, is not getting enough credit. There's a lot of things that are happening overseas that are benefiting our national security, and it's a shame that it doesn't get more press time.
There would be also Americans who disagree with the billions of dollars that were spent by the United States in two wars, as well as how much is often given to defense contractors that are here in Connecticut, which we reap the benefits of that revenue that brings to the state of Connecticut. What would you say to those Americans in the 5th District who don't agree with some of the policy decisions in the last few years?
Well, in the last few years, with the Obama administration has certainly squandered a lot of our tax money. The war against terror should have been really won some time ago, and it keeps dragging on. And I suspect it's going to continue on for a number of more years, until the people from those particular countries that are sponsoring terrorism understand that there is a better way. And if they could just embrace democracy, I think terrorism will resolve itself. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of cultural barriers to democracy overseas.
I want to ask Rich DuPont the question that I had the other two candidates address, and that's how you would rate President Trump's performance, his job the last 18 months, and how it impacts us here in Connecticut.
Right, and particularly in this 5th District as well. I would give the president also good marks. No doubt about it. No question from where I sit and the work that I do every day that I see us moving forward. I see us moving forward as a country, but I see us moving forward as a state and within this 5th District at a pace that I've not seen in many, many, many years.
Does President Obama's administration deserve any credit for how the economy has turned around?
I really don't believe it does. Quite frankly, I believe that President Obama's administration did more to curtail our growth and development than the previous administration does. And those were the decisions that administration made. But I know firsthand from the work that I've done with employers and with people in the community that they are living a better quality of life right now, and they are looking forward to the opportunity that they see again and should see given what we have to offer here in Connecticut.
This is where we live. We have 3 Republican candidates in studio vying for the 5th District: Rich DuPont, Manny Santos, and Ruby Corby O'Neill. You can join our conversation, 860-275-7266. Each of you are giving President Trump good marks for the most part on his policies. We know the 5th District, the largest group of voters, are unaffiliated. I'm just curious, your support of the president, do you think that's going to hurt you in your district? It's not solidly Republican, solidly Democrat. Rich, and then I'll ask the others.
Sure. No, I know it's helping. I know it's helping because, again, I'm on the street every day. I work with these people. I listen to what they're saying. They are looking for a way to improve. Nobody, no person, I don't care who you are, wants to fail. Nobody wants to be bad. Nobody wants to find themselves in difficult situations. Unfortunately, most people have not had the support where they need it most when they're young and at home to teach them where they can go. Right now, we have an opportunity because the employment opportunities in this district are so high to share with them the pathways toward improving their lives. And that is working every day, and we need to start in our inner cities.
Manny, the reason I asked that question about unaffiliated voters and your and other candidates' support of President Trump, we've heard from some listeners who say they're Republican, but they just can't stand what they're seeing in Washington. They don't like the president. Do you think that your support of the president will hurt you in your chances of winning this primary and winning the general election if you move forward?
There's no question that that this president does upset a lot of people. He doesn't say the right things. I don't say the right things half of the time, but he doesn't say.
He's the commander in chief.
That he is, and but his policies I will defend. His policies I will support. His policies is what I am focused on. When I decided to run for Congress, it was with the intent to go to Washington, D.C. and support those very policies that will help this state and this nation. When you look at the Democrat policies, right, the every city in Connecticut that is doing well is run by implemented Republican policies. Look at Danbury with Mark Boughton. It's doing great. One of the only cities doing well. So New Britain is coming back. It's with Aaron Stewart, Republican policies. Take a look at a number of other cities. Hartford, disaster. Waterbury, disaster. I'm talking about the policies being implemented are wrong. The Democrat policies that encourage social programs that discourage business growth and job creation. That is what is destroying our cities in our district. And I want to turn that around. And I want to turn it around with pro-growth, pro-job, limited government that encourages individuals to seek their passion and enter the workforce perhaps as an entrepreneur so that they can then be productive citizens and create jobs and give those jobs to individuals that right now don't have them.
You mentioned before I get a call in and then we go to Ruby that the cities are a disaster in terms of what's happening with over-reliance on social programs. All of you have mentioned the economy has improved, but the income inequality in this country is still a problem. And if people don't have a way to lift themselves up, to get educated, to find a job, they need certain programs to help them. What about that you would help resolve?
Right. So the reason that these programs are needed is because public policy has failed them. Public policy has got to create the culture in which businesses thrive on. Businesses is where you find jobs. And if you cannot accommodate a business, if you cannot make it, if you cannot implement public policy that encourages job growth, that encourages businesses, you're not going to have employment. So when you don't have employment, you have poverty. When you have poverty, we as humans, as compassionate humans, want to genuinely help those that need the help. So what do? Especially politicians. They implement these programs that then that they believe will help these individuals that are unemployed or underemployed, that are in need. But that is essentially a Band-Aid on the that is essentially ignoring the root cause. The root cause is bad public policy that has created a vacuum in our cities. Businesses are leaving. There's a lack of jobs, and individuals are hurting.
I want to get some time to get some listener calls in. I'm going to have Ruby respond first to some of our listeners who are calling in. Karen, you're calling from Meriden. Go ahead. Karen, are you there? Yes, go ahead with your question.
Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead with your question.
So I'm just wondering how the candidates can square with what seems to me like two very opposite things, how they say that President Trump is doing a great job on the economy, but then they also say that they're traveling around the state and seeing a lot of people who are really struggling. And so I just would like some comments on that, and I think that goes to sort of a second question of, like, how do you attract the unaffiliated voters when you seem to be very pro-Trump?
Thank you for your question. Ruby, do you want to answer that?
Well, sure. Connecticut is circling the drain, and Connecticut is at the bottom of the list when it comes to the economy and in job creation. And the Connecticut has been under a democratically controlled legislature for 30 years. And they used to have a tax and spend approach to life. Now they have a spend. Let's spend it as much as we can and then tax the life out of people. And that has not benefited Connecticut at all. It is because of the failed democratic policies that we are seeing our cities implode. We have to be proud of our cities, and we can't be. We have had these policies in place since the 1960s, actually. We've given those social policies and public policies an opportunity, and it hasn't helped the people in the inner cities.
We should note, since we're talking specifically about Connecticut state politics, John Rowland was a Republican, and the decisions he made caused a lot of some of the debt load that Connecticut has now, including not paying into the pension liabilities.
A Democratic-controlled legislature. It doesn't matter who was sitting in that office. It is a Democratic-controlled legislature.
So John Rowland doesn't deserve any flack for some of the policies he put in place?
It was a Democratic-controlled legislature. And it's a Democratic-controlled legislature that agreed to the CBAC agreement, the Public Employees Union contract, that is strangling the taxpayers of Connecticut.
I want to get more into, again, issues that are, I don't want to get too far off in talking about state politics, but it is related. Another call from David in Woodbury. David, go ahead.
Oh, hello, folks. Goodness, what about those cockamamie 25% tariff on aluminum and steel? This is causing farmers terrible problems in the Midwest. Like soybeans, they can't sell soybeans, corn to foreign markets now. Some farmers are wondering if they're going to stay in business. An F-150 Ford pickup is going to be $5,000 more.
Okay, David, I want to have the candidates respond. He's critical of the steel tariffs and the impact on the U.S. economy. If you're elected to Congress, your concerns, Rich DuPont, if any.
Yeah, I mean, David, there is no question that the tariff proposals and plans have caused quite a bit of controversy. And depending on whom I talk to, where, and on what day, they all have a different view on tariff and this policy. And I think that, in fact, is evident of what a complex issue this is. And unfortunately, in order to make corrections, and this goes back to an issue that we've been struggling with for many, many years, fair trade, free trade, protectionism, unless we draw a line in the sand and establish a starting point that says we're very serious about what we're going to do, then we're not going to be able to move forward on an issue that's been ignored for many, many years. So yes, there's some pain that we're going to experience, but I do believe that over time that is going to lead us to solutions that move us closer to fair trade, and that is what we have to have.
We're going to have to take a break. I do want to make sure that we leave time for another listener call. This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. The time's running away from us, but Rich DuPont is here, Manny Santos, and Ruby Corby O'Neill, all Republicans running for the 5th District. We're going to continue our conversation after the break, and you can tweet and find us on Facebook at Where We Live. This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Today we're speaking to 3 Republicans who are running for the 5th Congressional District. Ruby Corby O'Neill, who lives in Southbury, Manny Santos, a Meriden resident, also a Republican-endorsed candidate, and Rich DuPont, who lives in Watertown. You can join our conversation, too, 860-275-7266. I want to take one more listener call before we hit another topic, and that's education. Derek, go ahead with your question or comment.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead, Derek.
Okay, Lucy, thank you for taking my call. But I'm listening, and all I'm hearing is pure bias from these Republicans. The gentleman that you asked about no credit for Obama, I wonder which country he was living in. I want to ask him what condition this America was in when Obama took over office, and where did Donald Trump took America from when he got into office. Because all I'm hearing is pure bias. And that's why I will never vote for a Republican. Because I'm pretty sure Obama did some good things. I'm not saying he didn't do bad things. And it's early yet to judge Donald Trump. And they are getting head over heel, giving him all this credit. What about the children that he's dividing from their parents? I want to ask the gentleman, that same gentleman, I don't remember his name.
It was Rich DuPont, Derek. I'll have Rich respond.
About the children that Trump is dividing from their parents, if that's a good policy.
Derek, thank you for your call. So again, he's alluding to a lot of the strong feelings people have about the president. So he says President Obama's administration deserves some credit.
Yeah, Derek, thank you very much. I want to point out first that I was answering the questions that were asked of me, and to go to your point about children being separated from their parents, I think that I said nobody in their right mind would want to see children separated from their parents. But I think I also said you need to understand the issue and you need to understand what's really going on and not everything that you read. I did not say that President Obama didn't do anything right. I was asked how he performed in his administration, and I do believe that he performed poorly. I believe that as a result of some of the policies and issues that President supported, our people, particularly our middle class and the underemployed in this country and in our district, are suffering. And I think we need to correct that. And I think that social-based programs that are designed to assist people to lift themselves have been abused. And I think that has to be stopped. And I think we have to help people understand that they don't have to accept that there is opportunity and that there's plenty of opportunity for them out there. And it's not all that difficult when you believe in moving forward. And so I don't the last question was whether or not how I felt the president was doing. I didn't say that the president I answered the question. I believe right now that the president is moving the country forward, and I understand that we don't all agree, and that's what makes this world go round.
I wanted to just take a Facebook comment. Holly writes, what do these candidates propose to do about the low wages that make it impossible for a single parent, in some cases, 2 working parents to support a family? I'm going to turn that question to you, Ruby Corby O'Neill, because your story, your life story, resonates probably with this question. How would you help single parents and others who are struggling?
Tax reform. cut taxes. When I was a single mother, I wanted to be able to keep more of my money so that I could feed my children, buy school supplies for my children. I think we need to change that in this country to allow people to hold on to more of their hard-earned money so that they can invest it the way they want to invest it, so that they can spend it and have it go through the economy. I think that's a better way to stimulate the economy, not taxing the life out of people and sending it down to Washington, D.C., and then have candidates promising to raid the cookie jar and bring the money back. Leave my money with me.
Yeah. We just have a few minutes, but I do want to talk about education, specifically higher education. We've done several shows. We hear from many listeners who are drowning in debt from their college debt, and they're still struggling to find work. If you're elected to the 5th District, if you're in Washington, how can you help those students and families who are struggling with college debt? Manny Santos.
The college debt situation is, I believe, twofold. First of all, public policy has created the environment, as I go back to saying all the time, that discourages job growth, discourages job opportunities. And so folks are not finding jobs, especially here in Connecticut. So they leave, or they get underemployed. They get a part-time job. So with respect to the overall debtness of our student population, look, we've got to take responsibility for our actions. If we want to go to college and spend $40,000 or $50,000 a year and come out of there at $200,000 in debt, you have to make sure that you're choosing the correct career that you're able to pay that back. If you can't afford to go to college, don't go to college. There's plenty of opportunities outside of college to get a really good job in the trades and manufacturing without a degree.
Just a couple of minutes left. Rich DuPont, how do you help people that are struggling?
Yeah, I think, again, I agree that this is an issue with the system that's been designed for how many years that puts everybody on one pathway, puts everybody on a pathway to a 4-year degree from the grade schools on through, okay? And everybody's not destined to go to college. So we set students up for failure. Get rid of Common Core, give students options, bring skills-based training back into our education system. And the work that I do across the street from the studio at the Board of Regents every week is helping get people closer and closer to the options that they should have.
Ruby, again, you're a retired psychology professor. You've worked in the college system. What can we do for Americans?
I certainly have. We have very top-heavy administration in colleges, and the student loan indebtedness is just too much for students to bear. And that money isn't going directly into the classroom. It's going, as I said, to a top-heavy administration. But as I travel throughout the district, so many parents have come up to me, and students have come up to me, to talk about how biased and liberal the college campuses are. And I saw this firsthand, the hijacking of the curriculum by hostile liberal left agenda. And I would recommend that we pull back on federal financial aid for colleges and universities that stifle academic and political diversity on their college campuses. And students have to demand an education, not indoctrination. And that's what's happening.
We just have a little bit of time left. I want to ask each of you, if elected to the 5th District, name one legislator across the aisle that you could work with. Rich DuPont.
I can work with any of the congressmen across the aisle.
A Democratic
every one of them, and I've worked with every one of them across the aisle to do what I do every day.
One Democratic congressman you could work with, Manny Santos.
I'm happy to work with any of them that agree with me.
Let's see, Ruby, could you name one Democratic congressman or woman that you could work with, and not say all?
I don't necessarily want to work with people who agree with me, because that's just like being in the center of an echo chamber. You need to have differing opinions. But I have to say, I will work with anyone who will work with me to secure the border.
I'll work with John Larson.
You heard it here, folks. Again, we wanted to give time to our 5th congressional candidate districts running again for the Republican August 14th primary. Ruby, Corby, O'Neill, Manny, Santos, Rich, DuPont. A pleasure to have you all come in to let listeners and voters know where you stand on the issues. We thank all of you. Also, producer Lydia Brown, digital producer Carlos Mejia. Thanks to Carmen Baskoff for screening our calls. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Have a great weekend. And don't forget to vote August 14th.
Thank you, Lucy.